Thank you very much. Folks, I am truly blessed and overwhelmed by the turnout here today. I really appreciate each and every one of you showing up to hear this old country boy from Delhart, Texas, talk about his military career and his time in the good old sandbox of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Now, I graduated from high school in 1984 out of David W. Carter in Dallas, Texas. I only spent one semester in Dallas. There's a story that goes with that. That's for another day. But I enlisted straight into the Marine Corps after that. My first duty station was Iwakuni, Japan. Let me tell you what, country boy in Iwakuni, Japan, it just, whoo, it was rough. It was rough. It was a 1-year tour of duty, and I actually almost extended, to tell you the truth. Not because I liked the duty station, it was where they was gonna send me next. They was gonna send me to Camp Lejeune, 2nd CEB. And at that time, Camp Lejeune's 2nd CEB was always in the wind. So I wanted to go on what we call embassy duty. But at the time they told me that, hey, do you ever have plans on getting married? And I said, you know what? I'm gonna marry my high school sweetheart. They said, well, you can't go on the embassy duty. You have to be a bachelor. I said, well, that's not gonna work. And I was sitting in my, the battalion area, and I picked up this magazine, and it had these Marines running. And when I went in there to talk to my battalion commander, I said, what is this? He said, barracks duty. Your Marines is on a naval base, and all you do is wave hubs all day long. And I said, well, shoot, let me do that. Well, at first they said no. And I said, okay. But then I had this wise Gunny said, I thought you had put in orders for Marine barracks. I said, yes, it did, but they turned me down. Why? Well, I'm not an 03. He said, make them show you where you have to be a 03. And I said, okay. I filled it out again. They said no. And once again, I said, okay, show me. It said combat arms. I was in the combat arms field. So I went to Naval Submarine Base, New London, Connecticut. Let me tell you what, when I called to make my flight reservation, the lady was sending me to England. She did not know where Connecticut was.
Oh my God. Wow.
And I'm saying, oh God, I'm in trouble now. So I get there and I check in, and they said, Lance Corporal Brown, combat engineer. You build boxes and build bridges and blows up stuff. What are you doing here? I said, hey, I got orders. All right, so they put me on the guard force. We was there for 18 months, supposed to be a 3-year duty station, but we had this general named General Gray. And he said, I'm tired of Marines looking all pretty, waving hubcaps. I'm shutting down Marine barracks. And we're going to make them Marine Security Forces. So pack up, go to Virginia. While I'm there, I become a member of FAST Company, Fleet Anti-Terrorist Security Team. We could be anywhere in the world in 24 hours. That's from the time that we get called to the time we land. That was tested during Panama. I was the last team in Panama right before Just Cause. My team did all the reconnaissance work for Just Cause. So then I get ordered to the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, and that was the best duty station I ever had. 5 years there. I could talk about that for 2 hours. Well, I'm not. Then I get the wonderful orders to recruiting duty. Rock Island, Illinois, where they send me to Des Moines, Iowa. Then from there I go to 2nd Combat Engineer Battalion. I do some wonderful things there. Then the Marine Corps enticed me to go back on recruiting duty. They said, we need all you recruiters that was out here before, come on back. We need some leadership, blah, blah, blah. And at that time I was a staff sergeant. They said, come on, staff sergeant, come on back. We're going to give you the choice of your duty station. I said, well, I want to go back to Des Moines. All right. You're gonna be the NCYC of Des Moines. I said, okay. So I get there to Des Moines. They have been like rocking and rolling for 18 months straight. And the commanding officer, Major King said, hey, Gunny, Staff Sergeant, I can't give you Des Moines. I said, why not, sir? And if none of y'all have ever heard me talk before, I'm a very blunt and to the point person, okay? I don't try to hide anything. Major King was black. Here I am. He said, if I give you Des Moines, which is the best station with 8 recruiters, and it's supposed to be a master gunnery sergeant billet, and you're a staff sergeant, somebody's gonna say it's favoritism.
Yeah.
And I said, you're right. And I said, so what are we gonna do about this? You know, I came out here to be the NCYC of Des Moines. And now you doing no switcheroo on me? Boy, this is some recruiting stuff here going on here. And he said, what? He brought me into the big office he had and he showed me this map. He says, Grand Island, Nebraska. I said, what? Grand Island, Nebraska? I don't even like the Cornhuskers. I'm a Longhorn fan and you sending me to Grand? No. He said, well, there's 162 recruiting stations and Grand Island is number 160 from the bottom. I said, what, sir? And the other 2 stations, we're closing them at the end of the month. I said, so you give me the worst recruiting station in the whole Marine Corps? He said, well, look at it. You can only go up. I said, oh, sir, this is a hard pill to swallow. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You go out there for 1 year, I'll bring you back. You can do whatever you want to. I said, that's how we got here in the first place. Marine Corps told me I could do whatever I wanted to. He said, no, you have my word. So I said, look, well, let me drive down there and see what's all going on. So I drive down to Grand Island, Nebraska. I don't tell the recruiters I'm coming there. Now, I don't know if any of y'all familiar with with Nebraska, but I had 1 recruiter in Grand Island. I had 1 recruiter in Kearney, and then I had 1 recruiter in North Platte. So it's windshield time, all the way to the Colorado border. So I don't tell them I'm coming down there. I drive up, I go in there and I start just acting like, but this other recruiter, he had already got the word that there was a rumor that I was coming. So he didn't fall for the trick that I was just some Marine passing through. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about this town. Well, you know, it's a town. I said, oh God, this guy right here, first thing we're gonna have to do. And then to top everything off, you know, old Johnson, I hate to say this, but he was a sea bag with lips, all right? Meaning that he was really fat, okay? He was a fat Marine on recruiting duty. So that's one reason I'm sitting there like, oh God, this is gonna be a long year. Because he was the recruiter that was in the office with me.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there saying, this is gonna be a long year. But this is the part that really got me. He's like, well, Staff Sergeant, you know there's only 13 blacks in this town. What? What that got to do anything with it? Well, you know, some of these homes that might not be too friendly at you. I said, you obviously don't know your football history in Nebraska, right? He said, no. Touchdown Tommy Frazier. As long as I can go in there and talk touchdown Tommy Frazier, they're gonna love me.
Yeah, that's right.
And I tell you what, I don't know how many of you God-fearing people in here got a picture of Jesus Christ up on your mantle. Most of those homes in Nebraska got a picture of touchdown Tommy Frazier on their mantle. I mean, it's awesome. So, bear with me, because there's some good stuff right here. So about 9 months later, Major King get relieved from being our CO. And I'm sitting there like, oh God. He called me up, and it was like a covert operation. He called me up, and I got promoted to Gunny by then. He said, Gunny, meet me at the little hamburger joint down the road. I go down there, he says, can you get out of your lease? I said, yes, sir, I don't care. He said, go home, pack your house, get back to Des Moines. I said, what? He said, go home, pack your stuff, get back to Des Moines. He said, because he heard he was getting relieved. He said, you need to get back to Des Moines because I'm probably getting relieved today, and whoever takes over, they don't have to honor me and your commitment. So I went home, went back to Des Moines, biggest day. The next day, he got relieved, him and the sergeant major. I'm sitting in there, and the sergeant major walked in. Gunny, come in. I'm like, what in the world did I do? He said, this is your new desk. Sergeant major? I'm the boot Gunny. I just got promoted last month, and you making me the sergeant major. You're the only one I trust.
Wow.
I trust nobody else around here. Your integrity is what's going to make this. And my next slide will demonstrate that more. So, I was acting sergeant major for 9 months, and I got, as soon as my time was up, I did not look back. I tore up I-80 getting to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So, earlier I told you when I was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan. And me and John right here was talking earlier, and I was one of those kids that was homesick. I was homesick. I was missing my dad, I was missing my mom, I was missing my good old friends and everything, and I was homesick. So I was out in this little bar outside the Ville there in Iwakuni, getting there. And in walked, Lieutenant General Frank Peterson. At the time, he was a 1-star general. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I know this guy. And of course, he had these 3 other officers with him that every other word out of their mouth was, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And the mama son who owned the bar and everything, she giving him free drinks and all this other stuff. And I'm down there all by myself, and he comes down, and he sits down beside me, and I stand up, and he says, sit down. And I started, yes, sir, yes, sir. He said, why you keep on calling me sir? I said, because that's where I was raised, and also I know who you are. He said, well, who are you? Who am I? I said, you are the commanding general of 1st Marine Air Wing. He said, yes. He said, Marine, you look very down. I said, yes, sir, I'm pretty down. I'm homesick. I'm ready to give all this up. I'm ready to go home. He said, you know what? I want you to go back. I want you to be in my shoes for a little while. He said, I was the first Marine Corps black aviator. And when I first reported to my first duty station in Pensacola, Florida, the corporal who was manning the desk gave me a bag of laundry.
Wow.
Because he thought that I was
Wow.
a porter.
Wow.
And he said, my career was tough. But you know what? I never gave up. There were times that I missed home, but I just kept on looking at the bigger picture. And I said, wow. And he said, aren't you with Dead Sea? I said, yes, sir. He said, aren't they having a field day right now? I said, sir, the field day's over with. We're all, you know what we're doing. He said, well, I'm gonna pay your tomorrow morning for inspection, for your morning inspection. I'm gonna show up, and you better be squared away. I said, I will, sir. I'm always the best Marine. And the first thing I learned in the Marine Corps was that if you're not a squad leader or something, and you don't have assigned places in squad, you find the worst looking Marine in uniform, and you stand beside him. That way, when they look at him, then they look at you and they say, oh, you squared away. No, I'm just about somebody to at least squared away. So he didn't show up that morning. But we're gonna fast forward to my time in Fast Company. I got sent to Quantico, and he was the lieutenant general there, and he was in charge of Quantico. And me and some Marines were at the out in the little Pietz area, and we're talking, we see this car, and we see three stars on it, and these two girls come out to get ready to get into it, and we make a comment, well, aren't y'all something, you know? Y'all get to park in a general parking spot. Well, our dad is the commanding general of this place. I said, Lieutenant General Frank Peterson? Yes. I said, when you get home, tell your dad that there's a Lance Corporal from Iwakuni, Japan, still waiting to be inspected. You know, so I'm in the NCO school and I'm sitting in there, and the master gunner sergeant come in like a classroom like this, and he says, we call him the Grim Reaper, because if he ever pulled you out of class, more than likely you wouldn't coming back. So he calls me up and everybody's like, oh, Gunny Brown's gone. I mean, Corporal Brown's gone. I go and he says, who are you? I said, sir, I'm just a team leader from Fast Company. He said, no, you're more than that. The commanding general said that he still wants to inspect you. And he's glad to know that you're still in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And he said, carry on, Marine. I'm like, what? And that taught me something right there. Here's a man who sat down with the President of the United States, who sat down with all these other people. At one time, when he retired from the Marine Corps, he was the senior aviator of all branches of the military.
Wow.
That's how he got the name Silver Hawk and Great Eagle. Those were his call signs. But this man still, out of all the people that he remembered, that he had come in contact, he remembered that lonely Lance Corporal out of Iwakuni, Japan. So that moment taught me right there that being a Marine leader is not just what you do on the battlefield, it's what you do off the battlefield. How you affect Marines each and every day. Because that moment was the turning point in my Marine Corps career. By this man right here. And then when he passed away in 2015, I was somewhat sad. Well, I was sad, but I was really even more sadder that I didn't go to his funeral. But one thing that I will do before I die is that I will go to Arlington and I will pay my respect. Because that man right there, he's not the only one, but he saved my Marine Corps career. Because I was on the path of destruction that night, and he saved me. So now let's get to the good stuff. Desert Storm. We all know what happened on August the 2nd, 1990. You know, Saddam Hussein was bored, so he took his military, ran him up to Kuwait, and just annihilated him. I was on the USS Bellawood, aka Devil Dog. And we're sitting there, and most of us, we couldn't even spell Kuwait. We had no idea where Kuwait was, and we was on the Liberty cruise on our way to Seattle, Washington to do a dog and pony show. And they said, oh, y'all don't have to, you know, America's not going to get involved. They've been fighting those wars down there for 8 years. They're not going to get involved. You know, let them, they're going to kill each other. We're not going to have nothing to do with it. So that night, we had steak and lobsters. And anybody that's in here was ever in the Navy, you know that anytime they serve you steak and lobster, something's up. So Captain Love was the captain of the ship. He says, because we did our thing in Seattle, and then we were supposed to be going to Vancouver, and he came over and he said, we're going to drop the commander off and his staff, and then we're going to turn and burn back to Camp Pendleton to drop the Marines off so they can go to Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. And we're like, oh no. And if any of y'all ever saw that movie, Heartbreak Ridge, that's exactly what we were. We was in there, man, okay, is my weapon clean? Oh, hey dude, man, I hope when I get back to Camp Pendleton, I can find that bodysuit that I had and everything. I mean, we're all like running because we're like, we've never been to anything like this. and I was the senior person for the detachment. So, let me go back here. So when we got back to Pendleton, my team, they said, first it was deserted. The battalion had already left. Me and my team get there and they say, hey, Corporal Brown, you and your band of thieves, you are gonna stay here and train reservists. We're like, woo-hoo! I mean, cause really, most of us didn't go. I had already said, hey, I already got even though I didn't get a combat action ribbon for it, I already got my combat action for what I was doing in Panama. The type of work I did in Panama, hey, I'm good to go. I checked in the block. So we're hanging out at Pendleton doing nothing. Then one day I get a phone call, come to the officer of the day hut. I go up there, hey, Corporal Brown, you and your band of thieves, because that's what they always call my group, the band of thieves, because we played hard, we trained hard, and we definitely partied hard. We did some, they were good guys. I said, you going to Kuwait tomorrow? I said, what? Be ready to go at 06. So we said, hey, 06 came around, we're standing out there, and my wife knows this story. We're sitting out there, the base, he's like the cadre, because, I mean, Camp Pendleton is almost deserted during this time frame. He's like the cadre of all the bases. He's come out there, and so he goes to talk to me. I'm hungover as all get outdoors. My A/ is hungover, and he says, is anybody sober? So this one guy, he does everything. We finally get on the plane. We land in Kuwait. Nobody, the battalion don't even know we're coming. So we had about a month of living the no man life. We go from camp to camp, eat, sleep, do nothing. Nobody knew that. Then one day, me and my crew's hanging out at the makeshift Piet, and the first sergeant drives by. He's a Texan, First Sergeant Martinez, from San Antonio. And he always called me by my first name. Hobert, is that you? Yes, sir. You and your thieves get in my vehicle and let's go. So we finally got back with our battalion. Now, over in Saudi, most days were spent trying to stay hydrated and sleeping. That's all we did. You know, because 115, 120, it was hot. There's an old joke that we had that we was all turning Muslim because we would face to the east and pray to the sun that it was set because it was it was hot. After sunset was when you could see movement. That's when we would do guard duty. That's when we would work on our vehicles. That's when we would do, like I said, I'm sorry, but I'm just a blunt person. Most of us would try to hold going to the bathroom till after sunset. Because if you've ever been in one of these portable potties in 120 degrees, I know what a lobster feels like because there's bacon in there. We did guard duty. Our fighting positions, those most of our homes. We did everything in there. We slept, we eat, and some people, they made some elaborate fighting positions. Being combat engineers, I had access to all the heavy equipment, so there was no us digging. Hey, bulldozer, come over here and dig this. So we had some elaborate fighting positions. The AAVs, amphibious vehicles, we would sleep in those, camouflage netting, tactical vehicles, wherever we could find, that's where we would sleep. The food preparation. I love seeing this up here. I mean, this is almost like it was set here for me. As you can see, we was backhands, and this is exactly how we ate, in full gear all the time. But then we'll go back to our fighting position and practically strip down. So, but that's the way it was. I mean, 3 meals a day. It's funny, those little cans of milk, banana milk, boy, those are some good trading things. For the hardcore individuals, they did caveman workouts. Make boxes, fill them full of sand or whatever, water jugs, whatever. For a while there, a couple of us had this contest to see who could go the longest without bathing.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I tapped out at 29. Yeah. But the winner, his name Wood. That dude went 45 days before we told him, said, dog, we can't take you any longer. But the way we took showers were, hey, get a 5-gallon can of water. Hey, buddy, I need you pour it over me. I'll lather up. To this day, I hate spam. Okay? There's a story behind that. It's because, I need to go back. Gentleman right here, Dustin Rose. Parents love wrestling. Dustin one time was out doing some stuff, and he ran across an Army supply truck. So he stole like 5 cases of Spam from them.
Oh my God.
And let me tell you what, the first 2 days it was great, but after that, I mean, I done had Spam any way you can fix it, and it just got to a point like, to this day, I can't stand Spam because we ate it to death. All right, so none of us major in chemistry. There was one time they gave us some near beer, but we got the bright idea, we're gonna make our own stuff. But the problem is that we put it in a plastic jug. So yeast and plastic don't work. Yeah, we call it Applejack. And what was his name? I can't think of his name. It's not important right now. And I didn't partake. But I come into the little hooch area we got, and the guy's he is in pain. I'm like, what in the world's wrong with him? And there's another guy named Walter said, Corporal, I think he's gonna die from the Applejack. And it's like, oh God. So we had to take him to the battalion aid station, and then we had to come clean about our Applejack. Our company Gunny was a Vietnam vet. He thought it was kind of funny, but I learned real quick that yeast and plastic do not go well. This is my band of thieves right here. So now we get into the heart of the war. You know, I'm an old ground-pounding Marine. And to this day, you know, we bombed them. We bombed the world out of them. Me and my guys used to lay down and we just watch the sorties go over. And then we could hear an explosion in the background. And I'm not gonna lie to you, majority of us said, there's nothing gonna be there when we get there. They're not gonna need it. This is gonna work. But why that Gunny, who was from Vietnam, he says, they will always need somebody on foot to go in there and clean up. So we said, okay. So we sat there. We just waited. And then when we got the order to go, we was ready. My team says the training I had with the anti-terrorist unit, that's what all my guys was trained to do. They was trained to, I hate to use the word special ops, but they was trained to work with recon, snipers. So each one of us, that's what we did. We got me and the gentleman sitting beside me, we got sent over with a sniper team. These 2 gentlemen right here, I want to say they went with recon, and that's all we did. We disbanded. And that's what each one of us did. So there's been a lot that's been said about the friendly fire in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And I'm not gonna hide from it. I'm not gonna hide from it. There was some terrible friendly fire there. And I'll go more in details and some more as I talk. But one thing I'd like to say is that the problem with the friendly fire is that from Vietnam to then was a long time period. And the technology hadn't caught up. You know, we had, the 810 Harry, the 810 Warhog, great piece of equipment, but it was something else. The minefield breach. We breached 2 minefields. Algebra Airfield is where we ended up, and I'll talk about those that was wounded. Lance Corporal Thomas Jenkins, 1st Combat Engineer Battalion. He was 21 years old. He turned 21 two months before we went to Desert Storm. He had a cat named Betty. The town he's from in California is no bigger than, I would say, probably about the size of Hartley. And that's what sometimes people get lost about, and he was the first person to don the cover of Time, the war come home. What was funny is that I use the word funny, what was ironic is that he's a victim of friendly fire. Okay? He was part of Task Force Tara. Yeah, Tara. He was part of Task Force Tara, which was a reconnaissance team, but they were tracked. They had these vehicles. 810 Warhog mistaked their vehicle for Iraqi vehicle, disintegrated it. So when we got word that he had got killed, man, it killed us. Because he was the only Marine. He was the only Marine out of our little unit. Like I said, combat engineers usually get detached out. They very seldom ever work as a full 13-man team. They usually get detached out. But we have another Marine named Thomas Jenkins. This guy is a character. And I remember, because we're still at the base camp at this time, and I remember when Thomas came in, we all just dropped what we was doing, because we were like, wait a minute. Because he was pretty much new, and the other Thomas Jenkins was an old head. But then, so one thing I try to do in any presentation that I do, I make sure that I pay homage to this gentleman right here, because it hit home. And just like I tell people about my Purple Heart tags out there, they're not about me. They're about this gentleman right here, because I did a presentation once that's solely about him, and when you compare the young men and ladies who enlist from Amarillo, Texas, and him, there's no deviation. It's the same thing. Just like he says, the war come home. And we don't realize this until it actually hit the home front. Okay, so my job in 3-7 state, that are known as snipers, our job was to locate the minefields. So we find the minefields, and we all come back together as a company, a platoon. So we're 20 deep of combat engineers. So we get the bright idea that we're going to breach this minefield, and we're going to do a night breach. So we start taking off, we start humping up there and everything, then all of a sudden, we see a big explosion. I look at my navigator and I said, please tell me that they're not shooting up the minefield right now. He does his little map stuff, and he said, Corporal Brown, they are on top of it right now. So I look at Staff Sergeant Restifo and I said, they're blowing, I thought we didn't have air support. And he said, I guess they didn't listen to us, so he refused to go. Once again, friendly fire. So next morning we get up and we detach. We detached again. Me, Staff Sergeant Restifo, Platoon Sergeant, we go with Charlie Company 3-7, and we go up to the minefield, and Staff Sergeant Restifo come up with the bright idea, we're gonna do a daytime breach. No matter what you see in the movie, no matter what any Marine ever tell you, this is the first time in Marine Corps history that the Marine Corps did a daytime breach. A daytime breach of a minefield, it's something. And we breached it by hand. And it wasn't that we was out there probing with all this other kind of good stuff. And that's another thing with the mines that the Italian made, the last thing you want to use is a bayonet. The Italian mines are some of the most sophisticated mines in the world. But it was surface laid. And we could tell by the way that the mines were actually laid out, they had a certain pattern. You could count, and you knew there was going to be a mine. So we knew that they had been machine laid. However, though, when I used to train people, I would say, you know what, America, we got to tie our hands because any mine we lay, it had to be in very detail. But I used to tell them, I said, one thing I would do, I would throw a Mickey in there. Even though it's surface laid, I'm gonna throw one in there, or some in there, that's not surface laid. So that's what we were worried about. So we went through there, we put C4 on top of them, blew them, marked the lane, everybody was able to drive through. On the other side, we captured 60 POWs. And let me tell you what, it wasn't even a fight. We start looking in their fight positions. Basic necessities they didn't have. Water. We didn't see any signs that they was even eating. When we started taking their ammo, they usually only had one magazine. These guys basically was left out there to die. That was their sole purpose. And it's funny that some of them, as we marching them along, they would come up to us and say, "Some the same." They would spit. And we're sitting there, we get their lieutenant, and I remember our interpreter, Muhammad, Kuwaiti interpreter, we told him, we said, we need to know where the other minefields at. Where's the minefields at? And let me tell you what, Muhammad was determined to get the information. We had to take him off of him. But we found out that there's another minefield ahead of us that our intel didn't tell us. And by now it is dark. It is dark. So we hump up to this next minefield, and like I said, we're not going to, my lieutenant wanted to do a nighttime breach by hand, and I told him, you write the letters, because I knew that was a suicide mission. You're going to write the letters. I'm not writing the letters. We had a tank that carried a MIGLIT, and that's 1,750 pounds of C4. It'll shoot out a rocket 100 meters, blow an area that's 30 meters wide. You can drive, and on the front of that tank, you have a plow. It shoots. It shoots over there, it blows, then the tank goes through there with that mine plow on there, and it can take up to 10 hits. So it cleared. I'm like, sir, They know we're here. Trying to do a covert operation is not gonna work. Do this. So, as you can see, it lights up the sky. It is wonderful. But there's one thing about this MIGLIT that most combat engineers will tell you. Nobody wants to do the Medal of Honor run. If you shoot 7 of them, well, if you shoot 10 of them, 9 of them, you're gonna do a manual explosion. That means you're gonna run out there, put a charge on the first block of C4, and run back with however many seconds you got on there. In training, we have 1 second. In training, we have 1 minute. In real world, dude, how fast can you run 100 yards? And if you tell me 10 seconds, that's what we're gonna set the charge for. We're gonna set it for 10 seconds. So, luckily we didn't have to do the Medal of Honor run. So, we blow this minefield, everybody goes through, it's daytime, well, it's getting ready to be daytime, and we're walking. And we get to a point right outside Algebra Airfield, and we get a call that says, hey, you need to shut her down. The mechanized forces is moving, and we want the mechanized force to come on through Kuwait. And we said, okay. So we sat down. And something at that moment told me, hey, Corporal Brown, tell your Marines to dig in. And I said, hey, dig in. And I started hearing, oh man, we're not gonna be here, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, we're sitting there, and you can practically see rounds just come in between us. And we're like, what in the world is going on here? My radio man gets on there, and he said, be advised, friendly fire. You are shooting at us. Well, at the moment, we was in between 1st Marine Division and 2nd Marine Division. They think that we are Iraqi reconnaissance team. So they're shooting at us. They are lighting us up. And let me tell you what, you find out how fast you can dig with these hands. And, my radio man, he was a picture way on the left side. His name is Monfield, but we called him Moon Boots. Moon Boots is on there. Be advised, friendly. And we hear, no, we understand, but the tanks are on the left of you. No, they're not. Those are friendlies. And I'll never forget these words as long as I live. Dig in deeper, Marine. They was gonna keep on shooting. And let me tell you what. So our tanks that we have, they got the C4 on the back, we have 3 of them. And then we have 2 AAVs that have 2 of those on there. I think these Marines should have got a Medal of Honor. They come along with their tanks and their AAVs, and they do a diamond to protect us. And they should have got the Medal of Honor for that. And I guess when they saw that, they realized they was shooting at friendly and whatnot. But we're also at the time yelling, get out of here, because you got 6 vehicles with 1,750 pounds of C4. So if air fire coming in there, we're going to be disintegrated. In my time in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and I know the war is only 100 hours. However, though, not to glorify me or anything, I was actually in country 3 days prior to the actual ground assault. I had 3 incidents of friendly fire. An A-10, almost took us out one day. Me and 3 snipers, because 2 problems there. We weren't where we're supposed to be, so they took us as something else. But when they flew over, they gave us the wing level, wing back, signaling that they knew we was friendly. And then he came back and we could see Dash 2 was lining up. You got Marines pulling out flags, putting them on the ground and everything, because we want them to know this is us. But it was also, once again, one thing that was our fault is the way that we dug in. We dug in just like a Iraqi reconnaissance team was, because we were trying to, emulate them, all right? So, we get to Algebra Airfield, and you gotta realize that all this time, we've been walking. 370 State, combat engineers, we have been walking. I want to say by now, we're probably gonna put in over 40 miles. We sat down, we figure out that, hey, we're gonna blow the fence line, and then the battalion is gonna go in there and they're gonna take Algebra. We know we got artillery, we're gonna bomb, we're gonna drop everything we got. Just boom, 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 drop it. And we're sitting there, and I remember one of my guys asked a question, because our job is to blow the fence line around it, and one of our guys asked the question, well, what about they start shooting at us? And the guy that's in charge of the sniper said, don't worry about it. Their shooting ability is terrible, and their muzzle blasts will give it off, and I got a killer scope. I'll take them out. And let me tell you what, Dragon was good. But one thing we didn't take in consideration is mortars. We did not realize that they had mortars. So I blew the fence line, or we blew the fence line, combat engineers. We're running back, I get in my high position, and next thing you know, I feel a sharp pain in my right leg. I'm like, what in the world is that? And well, we started hearing mortar rounds, and it's just dropping on the battalion. And total chaos, total chaos. I feel a sharp pain, and you gotta think, I'm like 200 meters away from the battalion. And I feel that pain, and we go back to the end, and I'm debriefing, and Moon Booth looked down at me and he says, hey, Corporal Brown, you've been hit. Because we're in full mock gear, NBC gear, and I'm bleeding. And I said, well, the war goes on. And our corpsman's name was Tree, 6'4", built like this. I mean, the guy was awesome. I said, well, I'm not leaving the battlefield. And Tree said, make a bet with you. We're gonna fight. You beat me, you can stay. You lose, I'm gonna treat you for that wound and the wounds I'm gonna give you. So I'm out of here, Tree. I'm out of here. So I'm on my way to the aid station. You gotta remember, this is afterwards. It is pitch black. Because it's evening time and those wells are burning. So it's pitch black. Battalion aid station was no more than 200 meters away. And this is one reason that me, as the Marine I am now, I used to get on to my younger Marines about GPS and all that fancy stuff in the Marine Corps. Because that's technology. Give me a map and a compass any day. All right? Well, our GPS system that we had, the batteries went dead. So we walked around for, I don't know how long, 200 meters, I say it took us 3 hours to get to the battalion aid station. So we get there, I get out, and I'm in the Humvee, I get out, and they have this Marine, there's just like a huddle behind him. Blood is everywhere. He had took a piece of shrapnel right here. Yes, so he's just spewing blood. One guy even punched him, hoping that they would knock him out and calm him down. And the next thing I know, I see him, they take the blanket and cover him up And I remember saying, all we're doing is just keeping them warm. So I go to the battalion aid station, and then it's The Walking Dead there. I want to say there was 14 of us. One gentleman, a piece of shrapnel went down his throat, cut his vocal cord. We had a staff sergeant that his arm was practically just hanging on there. And let me tell you about the Marine and his vocal cord. He took off his gas mask so he can yell, "Everybody get down." One guy, his whole body, except for where he had his flak jacket, was just peppered. So we're sitting there, and birds couldn't come in because of the smoke, and they're afraid it was still hot. So they put us in trucks. And that one body, we have it in a gurney with a flag over it. And as we was driving 25 miles for like 2 hours, and we all got our hand on it, but everybody's looking up at the sky. Nobody want to look down. We get to the battalion aid station. And these are the names. We get to the battalion aid station, and one of this Marine comes running. We get to not the battalion aid station, but we get to the hospital, Area 5 hospital, and one Marine comes running out. Hey, glad to see y'all, because it's all hit in one unit area. All these Marines is from one unit. This is one company right here. And he comes running out. Hey, how's Lane? How's Brian? And we all just turn as we're taking the body off. Quick little story right quick. Lance Corporal Brian Lane, he came from a very fluent family. He was supposed to go play D1 sports at a good school. The other Marine, his best friend, coming from a long family of Marines, and he wanted to stay in that Marine family. Brian joined the Marine Corps because of the other Marine. And he carried that guilt for the rest of his life. Well, at least till I last heard, he carried that grief for quite some time. So I tell people a lot of times, this 4th of July, we are free. But the price that we paid for that freedom, the memories that's out there right now. America is in the liberation business. We started liberating way before 1775. And we're going to continue. We're going to continue. But there's going to be a price. And that price is going to be human flesh. I tell people this all the time, I can look back at jobs I've had, but not one day has ever passed that I regret being a Marine. Well, there was one day, I got my friend back here who I know is a Vietnam vet, but I tell you what, that rain in Panama one day when I'm up in the tree, I was like, come on now, there's got to be a better life than this. All right. But the Marine Corps is not something I have ever regretted doing. And I have a recurring dream on a regular basis that I'm back in the Marine Corps. But the only reason I got out of the Marine Corps was that it's a young man's game. And I couldn't PT anymore. I mean, I could still PT, but I couldn't keep up with the Marines. And that'll be that's a story for another time. My wife knows it very well. So, thank you very much for listening to me ramble today. Desert Storm was Desert Storm. But we was able to accomplish things because we had great leaders. Stormin' Norman, Colin Powell. Those are individuals who took a look at whatever. On a personal note, I think we should have kept on rolling. We should have kept on rolling. All right, but then the younger generation, they would not have had any fun. But we should have kept on rolling. But I look back on Desert Storm just like, and I'm not speaking for them, but I look back at some of my friends that was in Vietnam and everything, and some of the things they said is that war is a learning game. The only way you learn is by actually doing the war. And there's things that I look back on, me as a Marine during that time frame, is one, we was a bunch of, the majority of us that fought Desert Storm, we did not join the Marine Corps for war. We joined for college money. We had nothing better to do. We weren't drafted. But one thing that I'm appreciating that during Desert Storm, we still had that generation of veterans who had either fought during Vietnam or just now enlisted in Vietnam. So they was trained for that period. So we was there. So I'd like to just take this moment right now for any Vietnam vet, thank you. Any World War II vet, thank you. And post-humbly, you know the word, in World War I, thank you, along with the Korean vets, because the lesson learned during your wartime was lesson learned from me. And my Marines, even though I said earlier there was no training, I had them out there during the heat of the day with mine detectors because we couldn't take a time out. So, if you ever looking for me anything, I have I almost said political, but my public figure Facebook page is Hobert Gunny Brown. I'm starting to use Twitter, Gunny at 1371. That's my email. I'm not hard to find. I thank you at this time. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have one on your slide there.
Mm-hmm.
Was that bird shedding detail?
Oh,
Was
yeah.
that slide?
Yep.
Who had that?
Who was it?
The guy standing there?
Whoever was on the not too popular list that day.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But I will say this, because most of our gunnies and stuff were Vietnam era Marines, they set the tone. They got out there first and did it. I mean, that's one thing, because let me tell you, first time I did it, and my wife is she's probably laughing right now inside, because she know how I am with poo-poo. Yeah, but yeah, that was I want to say every 2 days.
Do you still answer to a general?
Huh?
Do you still answer to a general?
Yeah, she said right there.
There you go.
Any more questions? I thank you for your time. Y'all have one for
I got more about, how long were you in?
20 years in one day.
20 years in 1 day. So right out of high school?
Right out of high school.
Boy.
I graduated in May, and I was headed out in October.
Well, mine was right out of high school, but I was drafted.
Oh, yes. Okay. Good. Thank you, folks.